Hey, everybody. My name is Jasmine,
And I'm Sam.
and together we are the Unpresentable Parts Podcast, the Eve edition. So, hey, ladies, hey. And we are a podcast where we will discuss the unpresentable parts within ourselves and within our Christian faith, the things that have
Mm,
shaped us and made us, the things we're growing in. And we are coming from our own perspectives here. We are women of color, we are Black women, but we know Blackness is not a monolith. So we will go ahead and share from our perspectives, and maybe some of you may relate or not relate, but we hope that we just have a great time to laugh, to really think inwardly, and hopefully find some resolutions in God. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Sam, take it away.
okay, great. So today I am so excited about what we're doing. We are actually going to go way back to the beginning, and we're going to be talking about Eve and just
Hmm.
how we experience her in our faith from our perspectives, and just societally what we say about her, how we view her, all of those different things. So we're going back to the Eden experience and very
Mm.
excited about that. But before we begin, I would love to just kind of talk through and ask you guys to think this through. But for us to talk through what's unpresentable about us today. How do we come here? What is our unpresentable part today? So, you know what? This morning, I have to say, I feel really good. I don't feel like I'm necessarily coming to the space feeling a whole lot of, I don't know, down or anything like that. But I will say the
Hmm.
last few days, whoo, it's been rough. I think that I just really struggled this week with just a lot of not feeling good enough, not feeling able,
Mm.
just a lot of depressive thoughts this week. I
Yeah.
just felt like I was in a serious battle. And I don't know if it was coming into this podcast. I'd been studying out Eve and I just felt attacked all over the
Mm.
place. But
Mm.
I think for me this week, it was just really hard to hold on to the light, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
that was it for me.
Man, thanks for sharing that, Sam.
Hmm.
Okay, can I share two things if that's okay?
Yeah, girl,
Be,
do it.
be, okay. All right. Because one is, I feel like, is progress in an unpresentable part that I'm growing in. So it's like, all
Mm,
right, amen, making progress. And another one, I was like, Lord, just please take the wheel. I don't know. And it happened yesterday.
mm,
So the first one has been within marriage and communicating with my husband. When we have difference of opinions, sometimes it can be very hard because I'm trying to convince you to feel how I'm feeling or to see how I'm
mm.
seeing things, especially when I feel like I'm like clear or that I'm right, or that I'm like, why would you see this any other way? You know? That sounds so
Well,
horrible when I say that out
mm,
loud. But so I do feel like this past weekend we had a marriage retreat in our church,
mhm,
and it's so
mhm,
funny, right? These It brings out these conversations and certain
mhm,
things that certain maybe beliefs or different types of cultures within
mhm,
Christianity was kind of the topic. And so
mhm,
as we were discussing, I can tell my husband was trying to be Mr. Fix It, which that's what he said. But it's very interesting. But I felt like what would normally happen that's unpresentable is that I would want to start um, kind of withholding my heart. I want to kind of give him the cold shoulder. I kind of want to
mm,
have distance because I'm like, I'm mad at you. So, like, don't touch me, don't whatever. And it
mhm,
wasn't necessarily a matter of life and death situations we're talking about, but sometimes I can carry things as like everything's a level 7 through 10 sometimes. And that's not the truth. And that's not the
mhm,
truth.
mhm,
So I'm like, sometimes it's a
mhm,
level 2, sometimes whatever. So I felt like it was such progress for us in our marriage that on my end, I did not do that. I was not petty, okay? Because
mm,
I am Miss Petty Crocker, Petty Betty. It's just in my nature to want to like do stuff like that. So I really
mhm,
have to work on that. And so I'm like, all right, amen, God. Like, I'm not
mhm,
being petty. I'm like, we are
mhm,
disagreeing. We're not going to see eye to eye. it's not a matter of life or death. We're going to be okay and move on to the next thing.
Mhm.
So I was like, amen. So that was one. So I felt like that was an
Okay.
unpresentable part I'm working on.
Okay.
Right. Then the second was, I don't know if all seven demons were in my daughter yesterday. Okay. But like I was like, we got to get to daycare, girl. We got stuff to do. But and so it was really hard of trying to parent, right?
Hmm.
Um and so I'm trying to communicate with her, and I'm also trying to
Mhm.
figure out what's my line before that wooden spoon comes out. Okay. Then but I'm also just trying to give space as I'm looking for work. I don't have to be at work at a certain time.
Mhm.
However, I still want to keep a certain routine. And so I allowed us to have about 30 more minutes to deal with this,
Mhm.
because I notice with my daughter, when she does not leave the house in a good mood necessarily, or we don't have a resolution with things, it carries
Mhm.
into daycare. And on Monday, they said, hey, your daughter is starting to hit. She's starting to do these things because on that Monday morning, it wasn't a good morning that much,
Mm.
right? And so it carried into her day. And I'm like, oh no, did she hit a kid? What happened? What's going on?
Mhm.
And, it can feel embarrassing, but I mean, they're teachers. They've dealt with that. And she doesn't act like
Yeah.
that all the time by any means. But I'm
Yeah.
like, we're not about to have a repeat of Monday, little girl. Okay.
Mhm.
So just talking to her, but then I just felt like I was all over the place because I needed space, and I'm trying to learn how to like not come at her angry, right?
Mhm.
Because I know how I can get when I get angry. So I'm trying to take my breath, and just within me trying to do this whole process, Sam, I probably said some things I wasn't supposed to say. Not like I don't know. I was just trying to get it together so I can help her through it, not
Mm.
trying to be rash or I don't know. It was just a hot mess, but then I feel like we came with it in the end. We made a
Mhm.
resolution. I said, babe, we had a rough morning, but what we gonna do? She said, we're gonna turn it around. I said, that's right. We're gonna turn
Yes.
this around. Okay. I said, well, because we had a bad morning, the morning's not over. Okay. So I feel like it all came together, but I just felt like if someone had a camera in our house, they'd be like, girl, I'm struggling. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Mm. It gets rough, right? It gets rough, and I
Yes.
think I really appreciate you sharing this because we have so many moms who are listening, and it gets rough, and you show up to
Yeah.
that daycare looking all put together, maybe looking all put
Hmm.
together, or
Right,
looking
right.
disheveled, maybe, but I appreciate you sharing that. Oh, this is embarrassing, but to even recognize your daughter's patterns so you can
Hmm.
help her, because I think that's such a
Yeah.
win. So in your unpresentable part, I want to give you that win, girl. You recognize your daughter's patterns, and you're helping her early to not feel shame about it, or to feel like she's,
Hmm.
for her to
Right,
recognize that she can turn it around. So I
right.
really love that. That's a great way to segment into what we're talking about today. Like, things can be turned around. So I just really appreciate that. So
Amen.
for the first part of our time today, we're going to focus on just the first woman of faith. And I want to
Hmm.
ask those listening, when you think of Eve, is that what you think of? Do you think, oh, that's the first woman of faith? Because that's not typically what we say when we talk about Eve.
Right.
I've watched these TikToks, and I've heard people say, "Wait, was the fruit that good? Apple was that apple good? Eve, was it that good?" Oh, I've
Yes.
heard the old, it wouldn't have been the childbirth wouldn't have been this bad, and if you would have just done it right, like I hear
Mm,
a lot of people
yes.
blaming and shaming Eve. So when I think of Eve, and when most of us think of Eve, I don't know if that's
Hmm.
the first. If we think, oh, the first woman of faith,
Right.
Eve.
No,
What do
no,
you
I
think?
don't.
Like when you think about it, just when we first talked about discussing
Hmm.
Eve, and I love that we're discussing Eve because that's, our podcast is Unpresentable Parts, Eve edition. So we thought it important to go, let's talk about Eve, if
Right.
we're going to be her namesake to some degree. So
Yeah.
what did you think first, or when you first, maybe not in this year or this month or this, but prior to really digging into your faith and exploring Eve, what were your original thoughts of her?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that comes to mind, Sam, was There's this, I don't know if it's a meme, it's a little video that talks about when I get to heaven, this is how I'm going, with this is what I'm going to do to Eve, right?
Oh.
And it shows it's at a basketball game and there's a man walking and it shows a teammate, maybe a basketball player, coming up after about to attack him. And so, but this is a bad rep. They're like, man, when I get into
Yes.
heaven, I got some words for Eve, I got some hands for
Yeah.
Eve. And
Mhm.
so, but honestly, my first, just through my faith, things that I've learned even before making that decision to become a Christian, Eve was definitely the doom and gloom, is what I
Mm.
learned. Like she was the first woman, on the planet, but she's the one that started it all. And that this is where we're
Mm.
here. Like she's the one to blame. And I kind of feel like she
Mm.
got like a bad rep, kind of like Judas. Kind of feel like it's those
Mm.
certain
Mm.
people in the Bible, which I know we'll talk about later, but it's kind
Mhm.
of like she stained everything. So,
Yeah.
um, and this is why we get bad period cramps. Those were the things that came
Yes,
to mind.
yes, the bad period cramps, the bad, yeah, everything. Yeah,
Childbearing.
with you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, today I think as we're talking about Eve, we want to talk about her not as Adam's plus one. She
Mm,
wasn't just his plus one. She wasn't just his sidekick. That's not
mm,
who she was. And
yeah,
she's the very first. She's our first and the only
yeah.
first woman. And so I just think it's really important for us to go back to her blueprint. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something about going back in that story that would be really good for us because really her story is a masterclass in handling the spotlight. How would
Mm,
we handle
yeah.
this situation in our internet generation? We see things happen all the time where people are posted on the internet
Mm-hmm.
and just they're one mistake, they're one indiscretion, they're one thing, and most people can't
Mm-hmm.
handle that. You see what happens with
Right.
it's actually not good. It's not pretty. The
Right.
directions people go to and go through when they feel shame. And so here's this woman handling the spotlight. She is a masterclass in that. Really, her every decision is not the benchmark for us, the benchmark
Mm-hmm.
of the complex and the laying down the complexities of being the first. She is it. And
Yeah.
we can learn so much from her versus shaming her. And so,
Right.
talking about being the first, I do have a question because I think as a woman of color, and I think you talked about that
Mhm.
in the beginning, yes, it's not a monolith and it's not this is not everyone, but I know my experience, your experience. So, as a woman of color, have you ever been the first
Oh
in a
man.
situation, in a role, in a space, both in your faith
Okay.
and in life?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. For the most part, all of my job experiences, professionally speaking, I've either been the first one, so the only, or excuse me, the only one, or one of the few. And it can definitely be hard, especially depending on the type of job that you're in. My most recent job working for the judiciary, right? So you're with the people who are making these big decisions about your life.
Mm,
And I'm in some of the, not those necessarily decisions, but as I'm a part of different committees and we're trying to change work culture and things like that, um, being that voice, and sometimes it's treated as the token Black woman there.
mm,
Some people could acknowledge the authenticity and the benefits of having my voice in the room, but it can also
mhm,
feel like I'm the representative for every Black
mm.
person in this space. And it can be
Talk
a
about
lot of
that.
pressure. Yes. And
Mhm,
especially when I lived in Kentucky, a lot of my jobs, I was the only Black person there.
mm,
And it can feel lonely. You feel like you're being looked at. And I've even had some things said, that I know they wouldn't say to other people
mm,
that look like them, particular about my appearance. And so it's stuff
mm.
like that, that can really mess you up. But I've definitely, yeah, been the first or one of few.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And it's so funny, Jazz, when you said that. I had a lot of firsts, right? Because coming to the US as a foreigner, coming here,
Yeah.
coming to Orlando, Florida in the 80s,
Mm,
going to the 90s, it's a very different Orlando than it is today. On the east side
yeah.
of town, where that was predominantly, uh, honestly, for a long time, more uh, lower income, KKK, trailer park. You had a lot of that, and so that came with
Wow.
it. Not being stereotypical, but that's really what it was when I was
Hmm.
growing up. And so there were some mindsets that were there as well. And so I remember at my high school, Colonial High School, being the first Black Valentine Queen. It
Wow.
was the first time they ever had a
Wow.
Black. And here's the amazing thing after that. The next year they
Hmm.
had a Hispanic Valentine Queen.
Okay.
But it was like
Yes.
opening that door, but it was the things that came with that, and that
Hmm.
honestly, I didn't really understand what it meant to be the first at
Mm.
that point. That I was,
Right.
I, you know, there were some conversations about it where people were like, "Girl, I can't believe they did that at Colonial High School," and I'm like, "Really?
Yeah.
I didn't understand it at the
Hmm.
time." But I think what you communicate in my current life, in my faith, being the first. Okay, so I work in
Mm.
the ministry. I work in
Hmm.
the ministry in New England, and
Yep.
it's in a lot of ways, especially I became a disciple in New Hampshire. I was the
Hmm.
only Black girl in my campus ministry. I don't
Yeah.
know necessarily if I was the first, but I believe I was the first uh,
Mhm.
to, you know, become a Christian up there in my tribe, in my family of churches. And I will
Yeah.
tell you, I really appreciated the woman who studied the Bible with me because she recognized it.
Mm.
And I want to give
Yeah.
her credit for that. She was a woman who, she was in touch, and she did it so sensitively. She studied the Bible with me, and she said, I really have a vision for you. I really feel like
Hmm.
you can, I think you can do ministry. I think you should do ministry. Is that a dream? And I
Wow.
remember her, this, you know, this white woman, amazing, who became a really good friend of mine, that saw me. She saw that I
Yeah.
was the only, and she saw that I was the first. And she said to me, I remember her taking me to a conference. And she took me to the conference. And then at the time, there was a Black woman, Joanne Weber, who is now in
Hmm.
Los Angeles, but she was at one point in Boston, and part of our church family of churches. And Joanne was speaking, and the woman next to me, who was mentoring me at the time, she said,
Hmm.
I know how important it is for you to see yourself in someone else. And
Mm.
there aren't other people here who look
Mm.
like you in this role. And
Wow.
I want you to look at that woman and the power she has and how she comes across. She goes, I see that in you.
Wow.
It made all the difference in the world for
Wow.
me.
Yeah.
This
Sam, how
woman,
long ago was that?
uh, 1997,
And you see how much that impact still moves your heart. Like, I love that.
yes, it meant everything to me because I felt seen.
Hmm.
And it came from someone who I wouldn't expect to see me. And it's the
Mm.
importance of those allies and recognizing the first. And I appreciate that about Eve because she could have had many stereotypes about me. She could have had
Mm.
many, but the first in that situation, I was just really appreciative of that. So I think it has not always been, being the first has not always been that great,
Right.
but I
No.
appreciated the
No.
positivity of that one.
Right. I think
Mhm.
sometimes too with being the first, you're right, you're not aware of it because you're just living life. You're trying to break through these different opportunities. So sometimes it doesn't hit you, like you said, till after and you see, wow, when you think of, we just had Black History Month, but when you think of these things, sometimes people are aware they are the first to do
Mhm.
things, but sometimes it's like you're just trying to be human. You're just trying to live your life. You're trying to
Mhm.
be just treated fairly as everyone else. So you don't see it as
Mhm.
something new. You're like, this is just how it should be. And you end up
Mhm.
being the first one. And that's a lot. So I appreciate that she saw that and recognized that. And honestly, I loved how you said New England because a lot of folks think this outward racism and things like this are in the South, and
Mhm.
it's everywhere. It's everywhere, right? It has bled, it's everywhere in different countries, different whatever. But I think sometimes the North, right, can get the innovation, or we're all, outward thinking or liberal. And it's like, or sometimes people think that of California, right? It's just so liberal and all of that. But a lot of the same issues, especially when it comes to racism or colorism or things like that, are out there, and they still bleed into our church. So,
Yeah, yeah. I love, yeah, it's true. And I think as we talk about Eve being the first and having this polarizing thing, I think it's recognizing that within our family and our tribe and within our relationships, that a lot of times people of color are still experiencing the first. You're still hearing the
right.
first Black woman for this, the first Indian woman for this, the first,
Right.
we're still
Right.
experiencing first. I think it's really important to recognize that. And I identify with Eve being that first and that polarizing, that spotlight, and having to manage it
Yeah.
in a way.
Right.
But I do want to talk about Eve's original design, because
Mm.
in that being the first, I don't want to just come into situations just seeing what people see. I want to come into situations seeing what God sees and what he designed me to be, because I think that is a thing
Yeah.
in my faith that helps me to manage being the first, and that helps me to
Right.
manage it in a way through the lens of my faith. uh, Kind of going back to what is my original design as a woman with God,
Hmm.
because we have the layers, right? We have being a woman,
Right.
and
Right.
then we have being a Black woman. And
Right.
there really is a layer that I think
Yes.
men who live day to day life, many women who are not, many white women don't experience this. I, I have
Right.
one island, if I go to the right Target on the right side of town to get hair products.
Hmm. Right.
People don't actually, on a general day, realize how difficult it can be. Thank God for the internet, right? But uh,
Right.
there's certain towns I can't go to and get products. So
Right.
it's important to understand that I have got to see my value and get my value from God. And so Eve is really the first woman of faith and the original design that reminds me this is what God created
Mm.
me to. So with
Amen.
Eve, yeah, go ahead, Jazz.
I was just thinking, like, uh, again, in the perfect world, right? That this is how we will be seen, right? How God
Mm,
designed it. And I'm glad we're, uncovering things and learning things about this, because if we just have to take it back to, yeah, God, right? If we're trying to serve God, we're trying to be like God, this is how God had intended things to be, or who we are. But I was telling a girlfriend the other day just how much sin destroys. And
mm,
because of sin, not just even not talking about Eve in particular, but just sin over the generations, and how people, how shame and guilt and how the stereotypes, all this stuff kind of kicks in. So I'm glad that let's go, let's like strip it all, because there are these layers. It's Christianity,
mhm.
it's right woman, being a black woman, being from the West Indies, all these things, right? So I just love that we're doing this, and that we can just acknowledge that how things are currently isn't always what God probably intended or wanted from his people. So,
Yes, because when he designed Eve, he designed her perfect. He said, "It is good." It's good, and I
mm,
think so. Here's the kicker, though. But of course, because of sin and the idea of man, Eve is not a man's idea. Eve was created in the image of God.
mm, mm,
Has ideas about Eve. Eve was not, a social construct, but
right,
society has ideas about Eve. And so, in
right.
all of we've got to go back to God created Eve to be a helper. Ooh, girl, when you hear that word helper,
I
how
know,
does that,
right?
what, what
Yeah.
trigger did you get? What trigger did you
Mm.
get?
You know what? Honestly, I think just through my years of now becoming a Christian, I understand more, right? But I think sometimes I can still have this, like, I can think about what other people think when they hear helper.
Mm,
Like, I know what it is now, but like, I'm like, ooh, okay, just because I want to make sure you got this right. So my mind can sometimes be thinking about other people, like, make sure. Okay, all right. So like everybody needs to come correct, or they need to learn. So sometimes that can be my current response, but
Mhm.
and then you just can't help it from the word. When you think of helper, you think of servant, but you think of those things in such the opposite way God made it to be, right?
Mm.
So helper can come off. Sometimes I even think of the movie The Help, right? So
Girl, me too.
the helper, you're just there. You're not really a crucial part, although you are, but like, you're just disposable too. When you think of help, the helper, whatever, I can find somebody else to do this, or you know,
Yes.
yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, Jazz, because that when I wish I could tell you, yes, I know it's different, but I experienced what you've experienced. And again, because I have learned to have wholeness in my faith, and I'm still learning because I used to
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalize it, right? In this space, I need to be this. In this space, I need to adapt to this. You need to code switch, not just in
Mm-hmm.
your language, but in your actions. And I am learning to be able to speak about faith in a way where it's authentic. This is how I experience this. And
Mm-hmm.
it may not feel comfortable for you to hear it, but it is
Right.
important for me to share it. So with Eve, this woman is being seen as a helper by society's construct, by societies where she can be bought and sold and treated however, whichever way, because she's just disposable and a helper. And you said something that really struck me, and it struck my a nerve because I feel it to this day. When
Mm-hmm.
I come into a room or when I come into a space, I am seen as a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Eve is seen as a
Yeah.
helper, and she, in a lot of ways, if Eve were here, she'd need to defend what that meant. She'd need to,
Mm-hmm.
and she can come off a little bit, like, whoa, why are you so defensive? What's that? But she's coming into a space where people have perceptions of her. And
Right.
that's
Right.
how I connect with Eve in that sense, is going back to no, but that's not how God created. I need to remember this. I can come into a space and I can feel like the only thing that's seen is my Blackness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
when and that I have to soften it for someone or teach them. And so coming into spaces, I think it's important to go, well, what does this have to do with faith, Sam? It has everything to do, because my
Mm.
whole identity is in Christ. And I
Right.
have to find people in the Bible that tether me back to Christ. And
Mm.
Eve, I can relate to
I
her
like that.
being seen as this one thing, this one
Mm-hmm.
dimensional thing. And
Yeah.
because many spaces I go into, I am first seen as that until someone digs deeper. I'm not afforded the
Yeah.
what many of my white sisters are afforded. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yeah.
initial being that I could be anything. I have lots of potential, but I can come in as this one thing, expected to behave in this
Mm-hmm.
one way, and I can be scrutinized in this one aspect. So anyway, I just really appreciate you
Yeah.
saying that, because that I wish I could say that we're different,
Mm-hmm.
but I still feel it. I
Yeah.
can't. I still feel it,
Yeah.
in my role, in my spaces. And so I just think that's important for even anyone who's listening to go, look, that's not a negative thing. That's acknowledging it and
Mm.
seeing, okay, here's this woman who's seen as a helper, but God created her to be what is called an azer conegdo, a suitable
Mm.
helper. And the term helper is not this uh, assistant.
Insignificant. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's not insignificant. It's not assistant. It's not the world's idea. It's God's
Yeah.
idea. It's not
Right.
this image that the world has, that man has, that other women have. It is what
Mm-hmm.
God intended. And he
Yeah.
intended her to be a woman who was an equal with opposite
Mm.
power.
Mm.
That's what an azer
Wow.
connecto is, a woman with an equal. I'm equal, and we have opposite power to Adam,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And in our society, it's the same thing. We're all equal as women. We
Yeah.
were all designed to be this,
Mm-hmm.
to be suitable
Wow.
helpers, to be equals. So we can get it really twisted and the enemy has had
Yes.
such victories, right? Making it men against
Oh,
women.
yes, he has. Mm-hmm.
But we actually, I want to put that aside and go, no, it's not just men against women, it's women against women.
Yeah, we could do that
And
too.
we lose that part that, guys, we should be helping each other, encouraging each other. Remember, guys, this is who we're intended to be.
Yeah,
We're ride or dies.
yeah,
We are intended, we are created by God to have the backs of the men in our lives, whether it's our sons or husband, whatever. But in our
right.
relationships with women, because we're equals,
Yeah,
we should be that for each other too.
right.
Like like
You know what,
like my
Sam?
mentor was for me.
Um, what came to mind too, as you were talking, and I heard someone say this about how women, this was in a in approach to dating, but I do think it is like this in many areas, is that women, how men can come from a, what is it, like a plentiful mindset, right? The sky's the
Mm,
limit, and how women can come into things with a scarcity mindset. It's not a lot of us,
mm,
and especially not a lot of us Black women, right? That's what we think.
mm, mhm.
And and so it can pit us against each other, or we're trying to fight these things when someone is telling us that there's only, room for five. But it's like
Mm,
we can accept that, and no, it's room for all of us, right? We all have a seat at the table.
yes,
We all should be able to support each other and see that it's us against the sin, not us against each
yes,
other, right? Not us
yes.
against men, right? That's why some people think feminism is like, bashing men, but no, it's that's not what it's about. And so yeah, those are some of the thoughts that came to mind.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that because the conversation, you're right, it always goes to women want this equality, women's rights, women, and we just lose this crucial part. He
Hmm.
also planted a seed of women against women about scarcity.
Man.
And God says, God gave us all the same role. He's men and women, he said, rule over the fish and the
Yeah.
birds, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And he gave us all this same role. And there's plenty of work out there.
Right.
And I just, like I
Yes.
said, I think my my nexus point of this for me and my faith is really my mentor showing me that there's plenty and that I
Mm.
see you and I'm for you and I'm with you and I will, and we
Yes.
can be that for each other without
Yep.
diminishing, without assumptions,
Right.
without seeing the full potential, because we see
Right.
how God created us. Like God
Right.
created you to rule the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. He created you to be a ride or die. He
Mm.
created
Right.
you, to be a helper at eye level.
Right.
Like we're not walking around with our head down. He created us to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I really think we lose sight of that because society has told us different.
Right.
Kind of what you said. Society has told us there's not enough. There's not
Right.
enough space. There's not enough room for everyone. Society cancels us real quick.
It
When
does. Yeah.
it's like Eve
And
is
it
like
seeps into our
hashtag Eve is
church.
dead to me. Yes, go for it.
Like I asked my husband today, I said, even as you're talking, right, of the truth of how God has created both man and woman, right, to both do such powerful things. Not one is less than the other, right? I
Mhm.
love how you say that. And I said, Greg, when's the last time you've heard a message like that? Out of your maybe
Mm.
what, 15 years maybe being devoted to God, all the churches you've been a part of, when's the last time you, as a man, do you ever recall hearing anything like that?
Mm.
And he couldn't even really fill up 5 fingers on his hand about that. And I think when those things aren't being preached, right? When those things aren't
Mhm.
being talked about, and not just to the women, right? We can try to
Yeah.
just only leave these things to the women, but when they are spoken about as God literally spoke, right? This is
Mhm.
what it is. I feel like if we can do more of that in our specific fellowship, I can't speak to others, but I do think maybe that can help make a difference. So we don't get some of this worldliness. I mean, it's inevitable, but you know what I'm saying? We can make some progress when those things are preached and everybody hears that. So,
Yes. Yes. And as you say that, it is that same thing. There's plenty of room at the table, right? Because it comes back to women being able to feel welcome at the table
mm,
and to be a part of the table, to have a voice at the table. Because, like you said, for men, it's not just women need to hear this. This has
right.
been the fight, though. Men have been hearing it. What I do believe,
Mm,
men have been hearing it for years, for
mm,
centuries. So it's not that they haven't heard it. What I do believe is
mm.
women hold women back
Ah,
from the
okay, okay.
unity and the message, because
Mm,
we were created to really be at eye level with men. If we would unify as women and not get in
mm,
the way of I'm better, I'm prettier
okay.
because my hair is
Mm-hmm.
this, because I'm lighter skinned. Says, no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
so for real. Society again strips us of our identity, and it's the
Yeah,
enemy. Like let's put it where it is, right? It's not just society, it's the enemy scheme.
that's
So
true.
if we can focus on it's us against the men, and the men won't let us into the room, well, honestly, many times we shoot ourselves in the foot because it's us against us.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm going to
that's
tell you
true.
this,
I
there
can
are
see that.
many things that uh, I'm going to go in deep waters here, and these are things we can discuss a lot more later. I have always told my husband slavery would have never lasted as long as it did if white women fought for black women.
Mm, yep, yep. I totally see that.
And it's a conversation. It's a conversation. Sex slavery will not, it would not be as pervasive as it is if more women fought for the rights of women.
Yeah.
And it is, there is a pitting against, there is a judging, there is a looking the other way, there is a this does not
Mm-hmm.
affect me as women for women.
All right.
And
Yep.
so I say all of that to say is, if we would remember our original design, there is
Mm-hmm.
so much we could do together. There is
Yeah.
so much we can
It's very
foster
true.
for each other, and we can help, we can actually do what God intended us to be, and have that opposite and equal power that helps shift the balance of power with men and women.
Mm-hmm.
But the disunity, a group divided
No.
won't stand. And I think
Right.
these are conversations that are so important. But once you start having them, it's easy to get into all the divisions, colorism
Right.
in the Black community, you know, disparities
Mm-hmm.
between white and Black women in the job market, in the
Mm-hmm.
you still have the first Black model, you still have the first Black in
Right.
Vogue, you still have the first, you still have those things.
Right.
But if
Yeah,
we
we
would
do.
be ride or dies for each other and realize there's enough space, I can't help but talk about the Beyonce thing. I'm not advocating Beyonce, I'm not all of that. But I think here's a classic one.
Mm.
First Black woman for the country charts, to top the country charts. But there are
Mm.
many stations that refuse to play her, that refuse, like,
Right.
why would she come here? I really appreciated Dolly Parton coming in
Mm.
and saying, there's plenty of room.
Yeah,
It's
there
great for
is.
everyone. And I just, it's that kind of, there is room for all of us. Let's go back to our original design. We were
Yeah.
created in the image of God to rule everything. And there's a lot, God wouldn't tell us we have all this. We could if there wasn't enough to rule. There's more than enough for
Mm.
all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And it's just really important. But I'm going on a tangent, so I'll let you pull us back.
um, I like the thought about the Eve being kind of, well, not kind of, the first woman to be canceled. The cancel culture, right? That is so prevalent, and it makes me think, okay, if everyone talks about, well, if I was in Eve's shoes, right? We have the Bible, we know the story. Something that really helps me to give grace, um, because once you know all that you know, right? Eve didn't know all that we know, right? So to be that first, I do think, like, wow, was she really hip to what it meant for someone to try to trick her? Does she know certain
Mm.
things? Right? Like if she's the first, she is dealing with the first time she's having this type of interaction, you know?
Yes.
And so that helps me to like, okay, I can see because it makes me think of our my toddler, right? She's 4. If someone was trying to trick her, they could probably trick her, right? Because she hasn't had
Mhm.
that experience that I have now as an adult where you can
Yes.
kind of see it. Sometimes you can't, don't get me wrong, but sometimes you could tell, like, all right, it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, you know?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it helps me give her grace, but she is kind of like that scarlet letter, forever, can be forever stained
Yes.
because
Yes.
of the decision. And yes, she did still make the decision, but it helps, the Bible doesn't fully say all the thoughts that she's thinking, right? So,
Mhm.
but I'm like, okay, the serpent is like, you will be like God. You will know good and evil. And to your naked ear, you're like, that sounds great. Of course, I would like to
Mhm.
know, well, like, what's the harm in knowing that? But you still need to obey God. He still says no and trust for whatever reason that He still has your back and you still have everything. I'm like, I'm sure there were plenty of trees, right, that was bearing different types of things to eat, but right. So it helps to give her some of that grace. But I could see how after, right, it's hard to come back from that. And especially the
Yeah.
consequence, right? It
Yeah.
is such a big consequence because of it. So I think because of that, maybe that's also why, but it's like she really, I think society, I'm not sure as the earth was starting to populate if people gave her that side eye, but I definitely know, shoot, that mess happens today for real. She would be canceled, and I don't know how she would come back from it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I really appreciate that, Jasmine, because you said the word grace. We don't have grace with each other. And as women,
no, yeah,
oh Lord, we definitely don't have grace with each other. And so obviously I'm not, that's a blanket statement, but we can be
right, right,
really hard on each other. And I just
yes,
think it's true. It was her first time going through that. No
yeah,
one else had done it before her. And this is another reason why I love Eve. She's one of my heroes in the faith because I can learn from her.
right,
Her her deficits, her mistakes, I can learn from her. And it
yeah,
also helps me to see just the grace of God, even how he
mm,
loved her. But I want to
yeah,
go back to what you initially said, her first time being tricked, because she was
mm-hmm,
tricked. And we need to put the blame where the
yeah,
blame is, right? The disunity
mm,
with women is because of the enemy, the trickster, the
right,
liar, the father of lies. It's because of him.
right,
The
right, yeah.
disparities in race, it's because of him. Let's
Come
put
on,
it
don't
where
make
it
me stomp
is.
up in this room now, Sam.
You know,
Okay.
and that's important because we can lose again if we go back to Eve and remember this
Mm-hmm,
woman, what happened to her. Yes, she made a decision, but it was it had something that happened prior to her making the
right,
decision she made. She was
right,
tricked. He came
right,
in, and it was like the very first time that he introduced, did God really say? Like
right.
those, did God really say? Those 4 words are pretty intense
Yes,
because when you think
yes.
about it as women today, isn't that what we go? Is she really as good as you?
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
know, does she
Yep.
really deserve this? Should
Yes.
she really? You know, it's that he
Right.
is still he the first thing he did was create doubt.
Right. Yes.
Am
Yes.
I really good enough? Sh Do I really belong here? Am
Mm-hmm.
I really loved? It's not the voice a lot of times we hear as women.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
am I really? Do I? And so here you've got Eve, and he says to her, "Did God really?" And in
Right.
her defense, I'm feeling like she was like, "Well, yeah, he did. He did
Right.
say, you know, that you will die, you know, if you eat the fruit." But then she did something that as women we do. She engaged with this trickster. Where
Mm-hmm.
he came from, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know if she'd seen him before, but she engaged,
Right. Right.
right? And I don't understand all of it. But she in having the conversation, she says, and God said not to touch it. God
Mm.
didn't say that. He
Mm.
didn't say that. If you go
Mm.
back, and read where he told Adam. He was very clear with Adam. Now, God didn't, from what I understand, didn't give the directive to Eve. He gave it to Adam. So I don't know if Adam
Mm,
added to her, don't touch it. I don't
right,
know. But what I do
right.
know is she had this conversation. And, it makes me think of the scripture in Revelations where it says, whoever adds or takes away from the words of God, like that, you're going to be cursed with that.
Oh yeah.
Eve added
Mm-hmm.
something here. She said, don't
Right,
touch.
right.
He got her.
Mm,
He got her.
wow.
And we can do
Wow.
this as women. We can
Yeah.
add things that God didn't add because the world says certain things. We add those things in it. We have to be
Right.
careful. What is the original command? What is the original design? What is the original?
Right.
What is it?
Yes.
That is where we get
Yes. Right.
our directive and our blueprint. This is the original blueprint. This is what I follow. This is what God says. This is what I do.
Right.
Not what
Right.
man has added, not
Right.
what the
That's
world
very
has
true.
added. Because what's been added is what the enemy will use to cause my fall. Because when she added that, it says, oh, and then it looked desirable. Isn't that what
Mm-hmm.
happens to us? Oh, all of a sudden, oh girl, this look good.
Yes.
It's this is certainly
Yes.
real good. Our
Yes.
and then the desire goes to, oh, I can touch it.
Mm-hmm.
I can
Right.
pet that dog. Can I pet that dog?
Right.
I can pet that
Yes.
dog.
Right. Right. How far can you
And all
get
this,
without crossing that
yes.
line?
And now you are touching it,
Yeah.
and now you're eating it, and now
Right.
you have sinned. And I think it says it in James. I believe it's James chapter 1, the 13. It talks about the pattern of sin, right? It's desire,
Mm,
and then it's acting on the desire. It's temptation, then it's,
right.
it's desire, the temptation, the
Right.
desire, and then acting
Yes.
on it.
Action.
That's when.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see that pattern with Eve. And as women, we go, oh, we out here canceling this woman, but she is a
Mm,
cautionary tale for us.
right. Right. Yeah.
She's a
And
caution,
it's
and
something that
this is
men
what
and women
she
do.
did. Yes, we can learn from her. Do not
Mm-hmm.
engage with the enemy. Recognize the voice of the enemy. Recognize the tactics when he's pitting me against my sisters, when he's pitting me
Yes.
against my brothers. Recognize the pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. But then also see, God didn't condemn this woman.
Mm, wow. Mm-hmm. That's how we take
He
it
didn't
though.
condemn her. Yes, we take it that way.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't
Mm-hmm.
he didn't cancel her.
Right.
Why are we doing something God hasn't? Why do we
That's a
think we're
good question,
better?
Sam.
Yeah, why do we
Great
think we're
question.
better than her? We are her.
Mm-hmm. We are.
We are her.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I was thinking about too is just I loved how you're like, let's put the blame where the blame is, right? It
Mhm.
is Satan. We do have free will too of what we're going to do, right? God doesn't
Yeah.
control us like that. But it makes me think of just how crafty the serpent is and how crafty still is today. Is that because I was talking to my husband, like, all right, let's go over this word by word. What did the serpent say that knocked Eve off? That just threw her off
Mhm.
or whatever. And I feel like he came with the truth and the lie. And I feel like that's how you can deceive. I think that's how you can get deceived a lot because if there's a little bit of the truth in the lie, it's hard to know the difference. Like, huh? Well, I will know these things, right? But then will I, okay, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's how we can get tripped up today and why, you know, like how you talk about so much sin can look desirable,
Mm.
and maybe to one point when you think about sex, sure, sex is enjoyable, pleasurable, so that's the truth about it. But what does God
Mhm.
command for folks before you get to
Mm.
that, or
Mhm.
so yeah, I was just like, wow, I have definitely gotten so tangled up because of how sometimes these lies are crafted, right? So I
Yeah.
just thought I would share that tidbit of just like, man, that's how a lot of times we can get tripped up.
Yeah. It's really, I mean, I'm really inspired by Eve. I think over the years, as I've matured as a
Hmm.
Christian, I have I see myself in her so much more. I have
Yeah.
experienced many
Yes.
firsts. I
Yeah.
have had to be in the spotlight, and it's really difficult how you navigate that,
Mhm.
how you navigate the fall. I have fallen in
Mm.
spaces where I have been the first. I've messed up, you know,
Yeah.
haven't been the best example, haven't responded the best way, and
Right.
how you live with that. I think what helps me is I look at Eve, God didn't condemn her. In fact,
Mhm.
God gave her 2 sons. And
Yes.
and 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 yes, as many women experience today, she saw one of her own sons kill the
Mhm.
other. Can you imagine what
Right.
that woman went through? The pain?
Nope.
Here we are
I
polarizing her,
can't.
canceling her. And I think, did she blame herself? Did she think if I never did
Mhm.
this? You know, but God still gave her
Right.
the opportunity to have children. You know,
Right.
then in having children, one killed the other, but then he still blessed her through Seth, you know, her son Seth,
Yeah.
who is kind of like the line we all go back to, Noah, everyone goes back to, that brought us all the way down to Jesus, you know, and I just think
Yeah.
he still restored us through woman. He's still like
Amen.
his value, his creation of us has not diminished
Mhm.
because we mess up. He
Yeah.
doesn't condemn us. He doesn't create something different and new and say, "Oh, well, that one was a dud." You know, let's get rid of that one. We don't have to create woman 2.0. He actually still used he still used
Uh,
Eve, even after she was tricked, and I think we have to remember
mm,
that. The first thing
yeah.
we say about her is, "Oh, she messed up. Oh, Eve, you did it.
Right.
You sinned." No, she was tricked, and
Right. Yeah.
we are constantly outwitted and tricked. We are her.
Yeah.
We
We
shouldn't
are.
cancel her. God
Right.
didn't cancel
Yeah.
her. We
Right.
shouldn't polarize her biggest mistake, because none of
Mhm.
us want. How would you feel? And you gotta think about it, the worst thing you've ever done
Mm.
plastered on the internet.
Right. Right. For generations and generations to see, like Eve, and then like today with it, like how you said, with the internet, with social media. And even when you do try to move forward, someone's always going to find some tweet from 2013 that you didn't said
Yes,
to cancel
girl.
you again. And it is so
Yes.
frustrating that we do that. And it's like we want grace from God, but we definitely don't give that to other people, generally speaking.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I can't envision what, Eve went through. You're right, right? With a son murdering the other, like it's just like, oh my goodness, there's so much. And in the shame, I'm sure she had to battle fighting through all those things. Because even when I think before I became a Christian, and even after, sometimes I feel like I have more shame even after, because sometimes you're like, I
Mm,
know better.
yeah.
I knew better, and I still decided to do whatever I'm doing, whatever I
Mhm.
did. And it's like, man, there's hopefully another day, right? Where we go and we
Yeah.
try again, or within that day, right? To
Mhm.
how do I repent? How do I change this around? How do I talk to my toddler differently? How do I communicate with my husband? How do I love my neighbor? Whatever. And to kind of keep going. So I do admire that, even Adam, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
how did the brother feel? Like, do I
Mhm.
even want to have sex with you again, right? They had more
Yeah.
kids. Like, do I want
Yeah,
to, now,
you told me to say that. Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
but for even for him
yeah,
to have that forgiveness, that they are married, they're in it together,
yeah,
and that we are not our worst mistakes,
yeah.
that we can still turn it around, like I've talked about. So,
Yes, turn around. What a great, honestly, that was a great beginning and a great segment out of today. I mean, it was really, I really enjoyed talking about this. I can talk about it for hours, but I do want
yeah.
to, as we're coming to our end of our time together, just really remind everyone who is listening, look, the Bible has the answers for everything. But God.
Hmm.
It is always but God, in the
Hmm.
midst of it, but God. And I have many conversations with different women from all walks of life. But again, I am a Black woman. I internalize many things. I see things through a certain lens. I'm not speaking for every
Yeah.
Black woman. I'm speaking for this particular Black woman. And
Hmm.
it may resonate with some. It may open someone's eyes to ask a question. Hey, do you see things this way? Do you struggle with that? I think
Hmm.
that's what's going to bring about the not canceling each other so quickly in our hearts sometimes, maybe not
Hmm.
verbally, but in our
Hmm.
hearts, where
Right.
we cease being able to communicate or even fellowship with someone in our church because we have a perceived assumption about them.
Right.
She
It's
thinks she
true.
cute, she thinks she all that. Oh, she's aggressive. Oh, she
Yeah.
always mean mugging. We do.
Hmm.
We have these things in our thoughts and we can. I know I do. So let's just be real
Yeah.
about it. But I
Right.
think being able to reflect on Eve and go, look, here's the first
Hmm.
woman in the spotlight, the first woman of faith who had a royal
Hmm.
mess up, who was
Yeah.
tricked and who experienced so much pain watching her own son kill his
Hmm.
brother, who had to endure. I don't know what the conversations were with her and Adam. If they can
Right.
make it, anybody can. Who in all of
Amen.
this did
Hey.
right? Did not lose the grace of God. That God used
Hmm.
her. He turned her beauty to ashes. I mean, for her ashes to beauty,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
and there's no mistake that is unredeemable. And
Mm.
Eve is
Amen.
she is the spokesperson for that. There is no
Right.
mistake. There's nothing we
Mm.
can do that is unredeemable and will make us unlovable to God.
Yeah.
That
Amen. I appreciate that.
he will take our mess and turn it into a message. And
Mm.
so today I hope that whatever mess you're in, or whatever mess you have been in, can become a message. Whatever
Yeah.
test you're going through can become a testimony. And so as we move forward, remember Eve's resilience. Remember,
Mm.
she is the mother of who we are as women, and God created her. And He said, it is good. Remember
Mm.
who came in and robbed her of her identity, stole it from her.
Mm.
She was the first one to also go through identity theft.
Right.
Let us not let the enemy steal our identity. Let us not cancel each other. Let us not cancel our sisters of faith, our ancient sister of faith in the
Right.
Bible, but let us not cancel our sisters now. No mistake
Right.
is unredeemable, but
Mm.
God.
Amen. Amen. If you all have any comments or things that you want to share that's unpresentable or concerning Eve, please comment, message, please subscribe, visit our website at www.unpresentablepartspod.com. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. See you later. Can't wait to connect again.